This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review with Gilad Halpern.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review, a program dedicated to the word, to the thought and to debate, brought to you by the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute, which promotes humanistic, democratic and liberal values in the social discourse in Israel. I'm your host, Gilad Halpern, and every week I'll be engaging in close encounters of the intellectual kind, with writers and scholars, or simply people of ideas of all types and vocations who've done something to make our lives a tad more interesting. My guest today is an art historian at Ben Gurion University, whose research focuses on a 15th century Italian traveller named Cyriaco of Ancona, who's spent decades exploring different corners of the Mediterranean. Ciriaco's efforts were part of a wider phenomenon of the Renaissance period, in which artists and intellectuals sought to collect as much information as possible about the classical era so that they could revive its glory. Dr. Adar Yarum, hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Hello, good morning.
So let's start with this European effort to accumulate remnants of the ancient world that you call in your study the culture of ruins. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the culture of ruins basically is maybe the need or the curiosity to search for ancient remnants of the past, ancient monuments, whether architectural monuments or miniature art monuments such as medals or small sculptures. The person I'm interested in, Cyriac of Ancona, was maybe the first to promote a positive evaluation of the broken image, the incomplete image, maybe in sculptures or in architecture.
What do you mean by the broken image?
Broken image, well, as archaeologists usually find findings underground on Earth, the incomplete image. Generally, we can say that throughout the Middle Ages, people, whether scholars, writers, didn't really evaluate the incomplete positively. Whether Cyriac of Ancona promoted a new approach, while he wanted to promote the broken, the incomplete, and through the incomplete to evaluate artistic phenomena and artistic qualities of the past.
What do you mean by positive evaluation? To fill in the voids, as it were? To create an image based on a very limited material?
The materials were limited, that is correct. While we are following Ciriaco's drawings, which his new approach was to draw images, we find several methods of documenting ancient art, whether to copy them as they were, or whether to integrate images and somehow to create a new image of the past, and in that way to expose ancient images. The most interesting thing about Ciriaco is that he was traveling to distant places, distant locations that many people didn't visit, actually.
Would you say that he was one of humanity's first archaeologists?
Yes, it is possible to argue that, even though we tend to speak about modern archaeology while following later travelers, since Ciriaco himself didn't really promote a systematic approach to images, but yes, it was.
But the endeavor was in many ways similar.
Yes, yes.
So, what can you tell us about Ciriaco's own personal history? How did he become a traveler? What made him spend much of his life outside his native country at a time when very few people, if any at all, traveled?
Yeah, this is always an interesting question. As you walk through the city of Ancona, which is a small city on the Adriatic Sea in East Italy, you find a small street called the Street of Cyriaco of Ancona. Mm-hmm. And on the label of the street, you see the word humanista, which means humanist. Well, as you read the biography of Ciriaco, we have some testimonies of his life. You understand that he was not only a humanist. A humanist itself is a complex term or word. Many people ask, what is actually a humanist person? Maybe a person who can read the ancient texts and can understand ancient cultures. But we know that Ciriaco himself was not only a humanist, he was also a traveler, a diplomat, a merchant. Some say he was a spy.
Right. For whom?
Traveling for the Latins against the Ottomans, against the Muslims. Again, I think that what promoted him to travel, to leave Italy and to travel in distant places and cities was his curiosity and maybe his feelings of urgency to search and maybe to protect what, again, we call remnants of the past.
Where did he go? You said he traveled to distant places.
Well,
where exactly?
In Italy, of course, in Greece and the Greek islands, in North Africa, what is today Tunisia and Egypt, our region, Syria and Lebanon, and of course Asia Minor, and also he reached the Black Sea. It is an interesting question to ask why it didn't visit our land.
The Holy Land.
Yeah, the Holy Land. Since we know we have a lot of archaeology, we have a lot of remnants, but it is a question that still need to be traced.
It didn't address it in his journals.
No, it didn't. He is speaking about places like sites in Syria of today. Again, we still need to ask what in the Renaissance people knew about archaeology in ancient land of Palestine, because of course, we know we have a lot of testimonies today.
What did people during the Renaissance period know about this area? In general, did they just have this abstract idea of, okay, this is really the cradle of civilization, therefore we need to go and explore? Or was it some, I don't know, semi-systematic knowledge already in place?
I think we can say both. First, people were curious about the mythologies of the wider Mediterranean. Wider Mediterranean, we can speak really generally from ancient Palestine, maybe to up west to Europe of today, and even to Spain. And yes, mainly in the 15th century, people were searching for writing their thoughts in scientific ways. In the arts, you can see the need of artists to base their ideas with mathematics, with geometry. Everything which is relevant to reading the ancient texts. People were trying to understand ancient texts and literature in logic ways. And yes, we can say about Ciriaco that he was trying to, in some systematic ways, to understand and to realize how was the ancient world in visual terms and how it was in literature, how it was in history, etc.
And what was Ciriaco's own contribution to the whole debate? Why does it, how does it stand out, and what in him justifies your interest as a scholar?
Well, Ciriaco's contribution, he was the first to really edit a visual travel journals. That means he was not only describing what he saw with words, he was describing what he saw with images. As an art historian, I'm interested in Ciriaco in aesthetical terms. Maybe one of the interesting terms in the aesthetical terms is mimesis, which means copying. How did Ciriaco copy his images? Did he really copy it literally?
You're talking about the illustrations in his journal.
His illustrations are an important contribution, not only in terms of iconography, which means topics. What did artists in the ancient world, what were the images artists in the ancient world were interested in? What types of mythology?
Was it unique in this sense to add that many illustrations to a traveler's journal?
Actually, in fact, Ciriaco was the first to edit visual travel journals. It was small-scale travel journals which he could carry with him. Of course, it was a type of visual testimonies which he could copy or edit images for his friends. In an era without a camera, this was his...
Sure. So what is it about the illustrations themselves that shed light on his travels?
The contribution of his illustrations, you can find it in his exposing new topics, new images. For example, ancient sarcophagus depicting the 9 muses dancing. reaching distant sites where we can see ancient temples with unique decorations of these temples. Another important contribution of Ciriaco is in his reading the Greek language, copying and editing Greek inscriptions. With Ciriaco, we can know more about ancient genealogies, ancient families, royal families. I think not less important, Ciriaco is his contribution we can find in what we can call the history of memory. How it is possible to commemorate or to commemorize ancient cultures.
What do you mean by that?
As you edit travel journals with images, it is possible for you not only to read about distant cultures, you can also see how cultures were actually...
Oh, so to create the image, a visual image of the ancient cultures,
exactly.
Which is was unprecedented at the time. That's what
that is
saying.
Correct, yes. In his verbal descriptions of what he saw, it is interesting to see his approach to ancient landscapes. People who read Ciriaco could realize what is the landscape of the Mediterranean. Of course, they could maybe identify his abilities as a traveler, not only as an observer. His observations are very important. Again, if we use some aesthetic terms, we know the term of ekphrasis, which means describing images with words. Cyriac of Ancona was not an artist. In some cases, maybe he wasn't really able to describe visually what he saw, so he used words. And combining words and images was his most important contribution to commemorate ancient cultures and distant landscapes.
And what can you tell us about the reception of his works, of his reports back in the home country where the Renaissance culture was in full swing?
Well, in his times, which is the first half of the 15th century, he was very popular. People were asking for his help in identifying ancient images or ancient iconography. Again, some friends asked him to copy for them because as they knew that they can't travel to distant places, they asked him to copy for him or to collect for him miniature arts such as coins or medals or seals. People were asking for his advice as a merchant and as a diplomat, but what I'm interested in is his contribution as an observer of ancient images. And again, as a collector, I always try to see his travel journals as a mean of collecting images, and this is also a new method of collecting ancient art, actually.
Absolutely. What you said that he was a diplomat and perhaps even a spy.
Yes.
What can you tell us about the political dimension of his travels?
Well, the era of Ciriaco's times was a turbulent era. Ciriaco died in 1455, and we know that in 1453, the Latins lost Constantinople to the Ottomans. During many years before that
That is today is in Istanbul.
Yes, what is today Istanbul. And again, many years before the 1453, there were many political and even military struggles between the Latins and the Ottomans, where the Latins used to use the word barbarians in order to define or to describe the Ottoman Muslims. And I think that they promoted the fear of the Muslims. And this is, again, some type of feeling of urgency of Ciriaco and his friends and his companions to defend the Latin lands, which were actually the Christian lands, and to defend visual and cultural testimonies of that past. Every scholar of Renaissance art will tell you the very strong link between pagan cultures and Christian cultures. The Roman Empire is actually a strong idea, a strong concept of the Christian Empire. there is a strong link again between Christian empire and pagan empire. And
You mean culturally?
Yeah, culturally and even politically, yes. And this is also one of the main reasons for Ciriaco and for his companions to try to reach distant lands and maybe to expose some current proofs. In order to say, this is our historic lands,
right?
And we should protect it.
Okay, Dr. Adar Yarum, an art historian at Ben Gurion University, focusing on the life and works of the 15th century Italian traveller Cyriaco of Ancona. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our show today. Thank you very much for listening. Also, big thanks to Alex Benish, the technical producer of this show. I'm Gilad Halpern, signing off here in Tel Aviv. Do join us again next week for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. And until then, goodbye.
פעם יכולתי לבלוע כדור ארץ שלם, רכבתי על אופניים כשעדיין באוויר, פעם הייתי חיה ואת היית מותק,